So we go to a Fox News alert. Israel says it has eliminated 4 senior intel officials, including the IRGC's head of intelligence. This is the Quds Force headquarters, we believe.
It comes as Iranian missile strikes kill at least 8 and injured hundreds more as rocket fire rained down on central and northern Israel overnight.
Trey Yinks is live in Israel with the latest. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Overnight missiles rained down across Israel, killing at least 8 people, some of them slipping past missile defense systems at 5 different locations, destroying both apartment buildings and residential blocks. We got to one scene in the heart of Tel Aviv, just blocks away from the U.S. Embassy branch here that was also damaged in that strike. And when we got there, first responders were rushing into the flames, trying to look for survivors in the rubble. We spoke with one man named Gal. Iranians continue to launch waves and waves of ballistic missiles into this country. Overnight, we understand there were 65 missiles, and they were targeting a variety of locations. We could hear the explosions in Tel Aviv as some were intercepted overhead by Israel's advanced missile defense systems. The Israelis are striking back, taking out top intelligence officials from the Iranian regime, including the country's chief intelligence officer and his deputy. They also took out what they say are 1/3 of the ballistic missile launching positions. Despite the fact the Israelis say they now have air superiority over the Iranian capital of Tehran, this is expected to continue for a number of days, if not weeks, as Israeli forces are trying to weaken the Iranian regime and target the country's nuclear facilities. Guys, back to you.
Hey, Trey, would you say the number of ballistic missiles, rockets, and drones are leveling off from night after night after night? Because that's what Israel is banking on, that they're going to locate the launchers, they're going to run out of rockets, they can't replenish, and they have no air defense. So is that happening?
Look, the Iranians appear to be preserving what missiles they have left. We spoke with a senior Israeli intelligence official over the weekend who indicated the assessment is that Iran has around 2,000 ballistic missiles. And the Israelis have been able to take out some of the stockpile. They've been able to target, like I said, 1/3 of the launching positions. But this still gives Iran the capability to fire hundreds of ballistic missiles into this country. And that is why Israel is still in a state of emergency. The airport is closed, and they are bracing for challenging days ahead. Officials speaking with Fox News say there will be more casualties, there will be more destruction. And you see in the aftermath videos here, these are not like the rockets that came from Gaza or from southern Lebanon. These are missiles that can take out entire blocks in major cities like Tel Aviv. And from what we saw last night, and I was being very careful as we arrived on the scene less than an hour after the explosion, of describing where it was. But now we can report, because U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee came out publicly and said there was minor damage to the U.S. Embassy branch here in Tel Aviv. This is a residential area. It is packed with civilians, cafes and restaurants. And when we got there, for blocks, you could see storefronts that were completely ripped apart, glass shards all over the street from windows that were blown out. And so to answer your question, the Iranians are preserving what supply they have left. They certainly are in a position where eventually they will run out of ballistic missiles, but Israel is certainly not out of the woods yet, and we can expect more Israeli strikes throughout the day as they try to mitigate that risk of ballistic missile fire toward major cities like Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and the northern city of Haifa.
So, Trey, I'm curious. These missiles that the Iranians are firing, do they have targets? Or are they just shooting them out there? So the reason why I ask this is because, number one, they're hitting civilians. And number two, when it comes to that embassy area that belongs to the United States, essentially, would they have known that's where that missile was going to hit?
Yes, they have precision-guided munitions, and they know broadly where they are firing these. And without getting into too many details about some of the targets that were hit, I can broadly tell you that the Iranians are going after military and civilian targets. Now, with that said, the Israelis are striking in a much more precise manner when they hit Iran. They go after military leadership. Certainly civilians have been killed in Iran, but the focus of Israeli strikes, it's IRGC targets and it's nuclear program-linked targets, along with the country's ballistic missile program. When the Iranians fire these barrages of missiles, they're often hitting densely populated areas. And as we saw earlier in the day yesterday, at a different location that had been hit, the entire half of an apartment building collapsed after one of these missiles struck an area and killed 2 children, along with 2 adults, and many other people were injured. And just to give you a sense of the scene, because we often talk about the missiles and we talk about the ability to intercept them and how many are being fired by Iran, but the people that are paying the price, it's Israeli civilians. And when we arrived at that scene earlier in the day yesterday, separately from where you saw that insert where I spoke with the wounded man, we saw a son, and he was wearing a hospital gown because he had been taken from the rubble to a local hospital, and he demanded that the doctors and nurses release him, despite the fact that he was wounded, because his father was still buried under the debris. And we brought you that story yesterday, but unfortunately his father was killed. His body was pulled from the rubble later in the day after we left that area. And it speaks to the people who are affected here. They are civilians, they're family members. No Israeli soldiers have been killed in the Iranian response. A few have been lightly wounded, but largely we're talking about civilians. According to the Israelis, 24 of them have been killed since Friday night when the Israelis launched this campaign targeting the Iranian regime. And so as we move forward here, this is really important to talk about the distinction between the target list here for the Iranians and the Israelis. But we expect very difficult days ahead, given the fact that the missile defense system here is not perfect. And while they're able to shoot down a lot of the incoming fire, that also includes attack drones, these suicide Shahed drones that the Russians also use in their war against Ukraine. Their goal here is to overwhelm Israel's missile defense system. And we've been out here on this balcony reporting live as these missile defense systems are active over Tel Aviv. And we have watched as these missiles slam into this city. And the destruction that they cause is oftentimes catastrophic. If you're standing outside, you don't even need to be hit by the missile. You could just be a few blocks away and be killed by the blast wave.
All right, so Trey, 2 questions for you. What's the feel there in Israel? What are the people who live there, the residents, saying about this attack on Iran and vice versa? And then also, what's the biggest fear? What is left? What should Israel and even America be scared of that is left in Iran? Is it more leaders? Is it the Ayatollah, the supreme leader? Is it Fordo, the nuclear site?
Yeah, look, the Iranians have 2 pieces of leverage left, and they're not relatively strong compared to what they had when you think back 2 years ago, when their proxies were very active in the region, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, or the Houthis in Yemen. These groups have been largely decimated by both the Israeli campaign and then in Yemen, partially the American campaign. So they don't have the proxies to respond. So they're relying on 2 things: the country's ballistic missile program that is limited. They can certainly cause damage, but eventually they will run out of missiles. And then they have the ability to ratchet up what's left of their nuclear program. Now, the Israelis have targeted 2 key facilities, the Natanz facility and the Isfahan facility. These are locations where the Iranians were, according to Israeli officials, pursuing ballistic missiles, but they were pursuing, more importantly, according to the Israelis, nuclear weapons. And they were enriching uranium up to 60% purity, very close to weapons-grade material. And that is one of 3 reasons the Israelis say they launched this campaign. The big X factor here is the Fordo facility. This is their main facility. It is deep underground. And according to initial reports and officials that we've talked to over the past almost decade here, they say they don't have all of the munitions needed. Now, we should note, overnight, there was some movement of American interest in American planes to the region. There are real questions, and when you ask about Israeli civilians and officials, this is the question that everyone has. Will the Americans get more directly involved? I spoke with a very high-ranking Israeli intelligence official over the weekend. We had an extensive 30-minute conversation, and we got into the details of this. He stopped short at talking about what the American support looks like. He said right now he can tell me the Americans are helping to shoot down these incoming ballistic missiles. And I said, well, in terms of military activity, what does that look like? Are you encouraging the Americans to get involved? And he stopped, he paused, and he said, I can tell you the Americans are not our colleagues. They are our friends. We would not be as successful as we are if we did not have the support of the Trump administration. But he didn't want to go into the details about possible American involvement in striking the Iranian regime. It is certainly possible, and when we talk to people in the streets, they're encouraging it. They want this to be over as quickly as possible, and they know that American involvement could lead to that. And so in the days ahead, we will look out to see if there is more movement of American forces in the region to prep for a possible strike. But one thing that we should note here, the Iranians have stopped short of doing one other thing that they can do. They have not directly targeted American bases in the region, and they've not targeted embassies in the region, like the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. This is important because it's a tactical decision on their part. They don't want the Americans involved. But we've heard President Trump, and he said just yesterday, sometimes you have to let them fight it out. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
But, Trey, for the most part, the nuclear plants, they hit all four of them, but it looks like Natanz and Fordo, nobody thinks that they've been disabled yet. The IAEA weighed in and said from their monitors in Vienna, they think they're still intact. So you could never stop this operation if your objective is to get rid of their nuclear program now. It's not done.
It's certainly not done if their objective is to destroy the country's nuclear program. The IAEA came out today and said they didn't have any evidence of material that was leaking. That is one thing that they monitor in the region. It's just part of their job here in the Middle East. But the other thing is that when you think about these facilities, many of them are deep underground. And again, this is the leverage that the regime still has left. They can say, we're going to pull out of the current treaty that they're a part of to have oversight for their nuclear program. At this point, a lot of this conversation about leverage at the negotiating table is quite frankly irrelevant because there's a war happening between Israel and Iran right now. Now, the Trump administration, including the president, has been clear they'd like Iran to come back to the negotiating table. But Israeli officials say they're not done. They have many targets they still want to hit. Iran is a very large country. The regime has been preparing for this possibility of a direct war with Israel for decades. And so the job will likely continue from an Israeli perspective. As for the country's nuclear program, the question is, as the Israelis continue to hit Iran, and if the Americans get more directly involved, will the regime say, look, we want to come back to the table and we want to have an agreement? They were supposed to have a sixth round of nuclear talks just yesterday, and of course those were canceled as a result of this conflict.
Trey, great job. You were just on a few hours ago reporting live from a bomb scene. Thanks.
Great information.
Yeah, I just don't think there's any way we should have talks now. You had your chance for talks. You can't. Now you're going to talk to try to preserve what's left of your nuclear program? So what? We can remove sanctions? You can't take them seriously.
I think the president still wants to give peace a chance, especially when you talk about the escalation where the supreme leader could be taken out, and then that starts a whole religious war because Iran wants to unite the Muslim world. And I think if you take out the supreme leader, that happens. So he wants to give him one more shot. Do you want peace? Or it can escalate.
Yeah, he wants de-escalation right now. He wants a deal. He says he does foresee that a deal will be done, and he will help negotiate that, just like he did with India and Pakistan. But we could take out their gas infrastructure if they go after American troops or they go after us.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.